Today, Joe Almeyer will take you through the semester. Today, we'll be talking about political parties. Any of you have it as your TA, so this will be exciting. See this, so this is something new to me too, so, let's get a hand around the applause.
So Eric mentioned, I'll be talking about the political parties work of this course. And I'll be discussing how parties play into the representation give you a quick overview of where we'll be going throughout the lecture. I'll start by providing some definitions of what political parties are, how we think about political parties in political science, and we'll be mainly drawing from a framework developed in this 1900 by a political scientist called D.O.P. And he provides a couple of different definitions of what parties do, what they are, how they function. After we walk through that and develop an understanding of what parties are, we'll talk about the relationship between political parties and democratic process more broadly. I'll kind of like separate this out into pros of party democracy and the cons of party democracy. We'll spend a little bit of time after that on the history of the two-party system. I won't spend too much time on it because it's the history for it, but the key concept there we'll be talking about what realignments are and what critical electors are. So those are things to just walk out as we walk up to that. And then finally, I'll end with discussing voting trends and the idea of party identification, specifically the distinction between independent party voters. Could it step off? One of the first definitions of parties that was supported by Keith was the idea of parties as organizations, so defining them in terms of their structure and how they actually function as groups. So parties are formed with the intent of mobilizing voters to win elections and enact policies. And in doing so, parties try to achieve those ends at different levels. Because the United States is organized and the federal system, governments are separated out and government state level to local level, and parties also follow that same structure. So at the national level, you can think of parties in terms of like the broadest form of like Democrats and Republicans, but the tangible structure like the DCP, the RNC, like the Democratic and Republican Committee. And then for the state level, you can think like the Oklahoma Republican Party or the Oklahoma or the Oklahoma Democratic Party. And then not every local area, maybe not every city, or not every county has an affiliate of one of the two parties. In Norman, we do have the Cleveland County Republican Party, so that is pertinent to Norman, Oklahoma. But in general, you can think of parties that separate out these three ways. So one thing that I want to hear from you is why might parties separate out these? Any thoughts? Yeah. Hold on. I mean, are there
Isn't there like policy changes that need to be made at different levels of government? So if you would want to or modify the local governments with those policy changes?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, the federal system and some parties want to enact policies. There are different policies that you don't know. Any other ideas? Yes, for good one.
You need a kind of chain of command for these parties, so like issues can be communicated up the ladder to the top where they can make sweeping changes.
Yeah, so these local levels of the party might like select issues or values and then transit them up. So the national level party knows what you put into tangible policy. Any other thoughts before we go on?
Is there not a Cleveland County Democratic Party?
I didn't look into that.
Need them any level because of how big our country is. So it's cold. Plus, if you're smaller, it's small level, you're bigger as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So just by the way our country is structured and how big it is, you couldn't just have one organization. Anybody else?
And mobilize people. Like, I've never met people from the RNC and UNC, but like, the Republican Party, they're the ones who get me moving. And get people out the door and all those.
Yeah, absolutely. So the point that Eric just made is um, the part of levels that I want to stress probably the most. So if you recall earlier in the semester, the culture of each state differs, and also culture within states differ. So when parties separate themselves out into different levels, they can better tailor their messaging, in order to mobilize people at these different levels. So if a party has a local office or has a state branch of the party, then they can better attend to the cultural differences that people in that area will prioritize when they approach politics, as well as the types of messaging that they will find convincing to try to tell them what your policies and messages are. So this is a concept that's centered around political strategy, tailoring message, and also through taking advantage of that added information about what the social context of a certain area thinks is successful in terms of political discourse and what they think is convincing in terms of persuasion. So again, just to reiterate that, many politics differ across states and also across areas within states, then these different levels can help parties meet those needs and mobilize voters in that way. The tangible application of this is a party at the state level saying, well, we're not comfortable with the party, we're not buying the Democratic Party, we're something else. We meet your needs and we have our own agenda that's separate from the national party. To kind of approach that from the angle that's also a little bit like less cynical, they might also generally believe that their specific take on a party's general philosophy or general value is like more legitimate or more just than the national party, and they might apply their policies that way as well. So this is kind of just a way to think about how values differ across different cultures and also how values differ across different levels of organizations. I have a few tangible examples of this that just might be interesting to think about when you consider the impact of messaging on politics and party behavior. So when Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden were kind of, the Democratic nominee for president in 2020, kind of minor scandal that occurred was when Bernie Sanders framed his healthcare plan in terms of like an homage to Cuban healthcare policy, and Florida Democrats heard that, and the alarm bells immediately started to go off because Florida, if you don't know, is very active and competitive Cuban American voting bloc. And Florida Democrats want to get their vote, Florida Republicans want to get their vote. And so when the National Party sends a messaging agenda to the state of Florida, then both parties have to respond in a way that will get voters to support their agenda over the other. So for Florida Democrats, they thought that, well, if we are separate from the National Democratic Party, we don't need to adopt every single talking point, particularly when we know there's a social context in the constituency that we want to get on the side that will not respond well to certain messages over it. So in this case, they immediately distance themselves from that type of messaging in order to better like have an insurance policy, kind of establish their own independence and to try to make sure that they don't lose like a winnable. There are other examples of both sides of the aisle kind of using this strategy in order to tailor their message and tailor their campaigning strategy towards a specific state where the National Party might be kind of toxic or might just not align with the popular value. So I'm from Massachusetts, and Massachusetts is one of the most liberal states in the country. However, it has a very long history of electing Republican governors. The reason for that is because throughout the past couple of decades, the Massachusetts Republican Party has been very effective in carefully selecting a candidate who will tailor Republican Party positions and general values in a way that still aligns with the more like progressive culture of Massachusetts. So in 2018, the Republican candidate for governor of Massachusetts, Charlie Baker, campaigned on a platform being socially progressive, fiscally conservative, and that was extremely popular. As you can see here, Charlie Baker and Joe Biden get the same mark when they go for election in Massachusetts. The reason why that's going to occur is because, again, the Massachusetts Republican Party looks at the separation between different levels of party organization, and they say, we are not from the Republican Party, we are a completely different type of party. And they can do that because, again, political parties try their best to give each other, within that same like hierarchy, as much leeway as possible to mobilize voters to try to solve. So, that leads us to the second definition that he put forward, in order to explain what parties are. You can also think of parties as parties in government or the party as elected and what it does. So parties in government matter because they fundamentally shape everything we know about them. So, if you think about how the bureaucracy functions, particularly at the federal level, you're looking at presidential appointments of cabinet secretaries who then guide the range of possible policies that federal agencies will pursue. And given that the president is affiliated with the party acts through the president and influences the bureaucracy in that way. The courts also then get influenced by parties due to the process of nominations in the court conflicts by the Senate. So both the partisan affiliation of the president and partisan affiliation of senators influence how the law gets interpreted through the words and minds of justice at the federal level. Probably the most straightforward aspect of parties in government is just like legislative process aspect. So obviously the members of the U.S. House, the U.S. Senate, and then legislative chambers at the state level, even to some extent city councilors, sometimes they're nonpartisan, sometimes they're not. They influence the policies that not only get voted on, but also the actual policy outcomes that occur. So at the federal level, one way to think about this is like the role of House and Senate committees. So some bills won't even get a vote, and which bills even get to that vote will depend on the party control of the committee. Of course, Money's lecture from Alfred and from Dennis mentioned that other factors that play influence policy, lobbying and interest groups, money and interest, those types of things, they definitely play a role. And they also influence parties as well. When they join the campaigns, we talk a lot about campaigns, those types of things. However, they have to kind of act through the parties. They can't make a law or pass a bill without getting someone in some party to get on board with it. So even with their influence, parties are still the primary driving force. Anything that the government does, maybe the government. Another way to think about this, besides that process part of parties in government, is to identify like specific figureheads who are associated with each party. So you could say the Republican Party is represented by a few national leaders. So former President Trump, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Anyone who has a leadership role in the party can also be said to be the party or a figurehead of the party. For the Democratic Party, you can think of President Biden, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, and then very recently House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. And again, you can think of parties in government as what they do or who gets elected. Additionally, parties can also be very vague in their definition, and they can be anyone who's a part of the party. So when we consider parties in the electorate, we're thinking of you, we're thinking of elected people, some access version of that. However, we have the caveat that in order to be part of parties in the electorate, you have to be someone who identifies the party or leans for the party. And the lean for the party aspect of this is extremely important nowadays, because in the long run, association with the label of independent or formally registered independent has become much more widespread than it has in the past. You can see here that from 2021 onward, there has been a quite sizable portion of the population that has been independent. If you set it up further, which is later on, talk about party identification, you can see that's a very different. And despite the fact that they look like they're allowing independents to maybe affiliate with a party and defining parties under its content and control of the framework, if you break down what it means to be independent, most people will call themselves independent in one way or another. So for the most part, the vast majority of people who do vote who are politically active fall into the definition of anyone who identifies with. That brings us to our next part of the lecture. So when considering parties in the context of democracy, it's worth asking why have them, like what do they do, what purpose do they serve, and are they good or bad for democratic society? So the most important function of parties in a democracy, according to the literature of political science, is their ability to allow voters to have a very clear yes or no signal from it. So this is framed as like telling elites what the public interests are and how they should represent the public. So this is tied into an idea of accountability that was first developed by political scientist and Frank now way back in 1900, but it's subsequently been expanded upon, re-examined, and it's also referred to like the responsible party model, where elections serve as like accountability flashpoint for voting members of the public to say, we love what the incumbent's been doing, we hate what the incumbent's been doing, or like we think that this new idea outcompetes the old idea. So with a yes vote, that's the most important way to step it like that. Additionally, parties take fragments of society and they pour them around well-known platforms. There's some semblance of unity in the way people interact with each other, organize those types of things. We noted on Monday how interest kind of over fragment society, and sometimes they can kind of break apart issues that might be part of a larger whole. The party is the other side of that coin. They can combine many issues in one platform. They can represent popular values as opposed to these like money interests who are going to be privileged by special interest groups because special interest groups rely on money and they try to influence policy for that purpose. Whereas ideally, political parties have a closer connection to people, popular values. The idea is that even through that direct primary system, someone can't make it to the primary unless they really tap into something that's important in the community that votes for that party. So if you recall the specific quote that Dennis Nelson mentioned on Monday about how special interest is speaking up about that pluralism, kind of speaking up about that, if it's understood through special interest groups, political parties try to correct that by having that closer popular. And that close connection ties into the mobilization that Eric talked about in his question, where parties, through their links to people, and through their ability to unify fragmented interests, try to get people to participate in democracy as much as possible, and they try to get people to translate their like abstract interests and values into tangible. So, as you might like know, these are pretty bold points, and they are kind of pretty lofty goals for parties to have. So another question I want to ask you guys is, do you feel that parties in the United States actually do these things, and why not? If you feel it is that. So what are some ways that political parties might not succeed?
I feel like political parties fragment things like, you know, they take apart those special interests and divide them on a national level very frequently. And so a lot of times I feel like political parties, maybe it's not intentional, but their goal or the result of whatever they're doing is they split, you know, the knowledge or the information. Sometimes they can come across as misinformation. They're trying to push their side and they're not allowing the voters to see these kind of issues because they're letting them not vote.
Different
We got smartness on this side of the eyeball. Repeat the question.
Yeah, so since these are pretty bold claims to make about what parties do you think that parties can actually achieve? So think about like, do you think that parties are accountable to people? Do you think that they do mobilize voters? Do you think that they do reflect popular values? What are your thoughts? Yes, there's one of them. Right.
Yeah, they do separate like those biases like one way or another, but there's you know where they kind of from middle ground, and like usually if you agree with one side, you don't. How would you do
Yeah, cool. And the, having both the yes, no signal and, representing the people on the. Get the commitment to be part of it. Other thoughts?
I'll say it's pretty effective, because they got Trump elected, and they got Biden beat Trump.
Yeah, so they do present like really the contract. And, if there is turnover, if we go back to, if you're calling that like greenhouse index of democracy, one of their criteria is like how competitive our elections, and how much turnover is in government. So, if we do see a lot of turnover, then maybe the other. Any other thoughts for everyone? Okay. So you guys touched on a few of these points. I want to formalize them a little bit more. To talk about maybe the drawbacks of the two-party system. So one of the most forceful critiques of the formation of parties came from George Washington in the farewell address, when he left the presidency. And this particular quote here kind of talks about the dangers that come from politicians themselves. So maybe politicians can take advantage of that link between parties and the popular will. They're kind of advancing their own self-interest and not necessarily be held accountable. There's also another element of like accountable parties that focus more on the voters themselves. So parties can encourage people to be very polarized. They can promote groupthink by encouraging people to join a team to be against another team. And instead of evaluating or being true to their own values, they might like choose their views to match up with the party. There's also a point that was mentioned by the person who gave a response earlier that parties might sort a little bit much, where their coalitions are very broad, but might not actually have every single position included in the Republican Party platform, the Democratic Party platform. And since we have a two-party system where you're voting for the entire party and not voting for somebody to balance every 2%, parties by themselves don't allow you to make those choices and have those choices registered in how the government. So with all those things, you can see that there are ideals behind why a party might help democracy, but there are also some drawbacks, and some of them are fairly monitored with support. Especially when we talk about that big sort of process a few lessons ago, where people might kind of combine the polarization and grouping components to select where they live, who they associate with, those types of things. And that's harm democracy by making people not know their advantage. That brings us to a deeper discussion of the two-party system in and of itself. So the two-party system is advanced by structural rules, and then it's also advanced by a few more intangibles. So first and foremost, elections are winner take all in the American context, and that means that if you get 50% of the vote plus one vote, you win. And this combines the idea of some member district, meaning that you have a congressional district, there's one winner. If you get that 50% plus one, you win the entire election. That entrenches the two-party system by making it a much less attractive proposal to vote for a third-party candidate, because you know that you just have to get to that 50% threshold to get someone in. So other systems might have multi-member districts where, for example, if you had, let's say, like the Democratic 2% of the vote plus one, and the Republican just loses by one vote, you might have two representatives in that district. I don't know how they do it. Additionally, there are clauses in place that prevent competition against Democrats and Republicans. Candidates who want to run on a different party or want to run as independents have to go through like two processes to come into state fees. And they also have to deal usually with like election commissions that's going to be like bipartisan, non-partisan, meaning they have like Democrat and Republican members, but they don't represent other people too much. One example of commissions that serve that function is the Commission on Presidential Debates, which organizes the national televised presidential debate that was first in about 1988 to an organization. And not only do they only have board members, but they also require any candidate who wants to be in the debate to qualify with 13% national support. And especially on polls that they can do so, the candidates themselves get to. And that really constrains how much information American voters have about other candidates for president in particular, but other races like state level government and senate races and those types of things, where not every organization that is equally supportive of the other. The other major intangible point that influences the entrenchment of the two-party system is the idea that parties are thinking about considering what public is at a certain point, and targeting a specific thing is likely to move. And when they see a third-party platform start to gain ground, they tend to think about what portion of that party platform are both compatible with the existing Democrat Republican platform, and what can be co-op in order to get that voter block into our base and voting for us in that process. So for examples are like gay marriage legalization and marijuana legalization, which were both early announced by the Libertarian Green Party, to have like voters talked about minor parties in America, long before Democrats or Republicans began to take on those issues or even acknowledge those issues. So there is kind of a trend of when third parties have like marquee issues that the public might get behind at some point, the existing parties will recognize that popularity, take that into account when they form their own party platform strategy. So that leads us to a little bit of a discussion on how the United States differs from other democracies. So many other democracies don't have a two-party system and have multi-party parliamentary systems. And there are a few different features that you want to keep in mind when you consider what separates the United States from other democracies. So in other democracies, most of the time party members typically use the party. This is then again related to the idea that parties with other countries can be more professionalized and that people who are career politicians. And that is really something why in the United States. However, the party organization itself is kind of in those other democracies. Through that organization, the party leadership could be the one who specifically selects qualified candidates to run for office. For the United States, we select our candidates in state primaries or voters. Who is the Republican going to represent me in the general Senate race? Who's the Republican going to represent me in the in the general general election for presidency? And same with Democrats. And that's kind of how we operate with our other countries as well. Instead of those like single member ideas that I talked about with Winston, they have an idea of proportional representation where they usually have these multi-member districts. They also have parliament generally that requires multiple parties to build coalitions in order to govern. Whereas in America, we focus very heavily on the president, the powers of the presidency, and then we separate out. So that kind of is a different structure to that in terms of the two parties of the United States, or the multi-party democracy. And then there's a little bit more about how candidates are selected for office in the United States and who runs. So in the United States, rather than being chosen by party leadership, many candidates actively just choose to go run and see if they can win. Or they're recruited by specific activists or special interest groups that are particularly popular or have sway with the primary constituency of the party. So Republican activists might have an idea in mind of someone who really represents their values. Democrat activists might have one in mind instead as well. And some groups associated with that might approach someone to get them to run or throw money to where you're those types of things. This ties into the idea that campaigns in the United States are important. So that means influence them pretty heavily. Because we don't have the like curation process of party leadership, they don't have much control relative to others. So that's where third section of the lecture about realignment and about some of the history of party politics in America and how the two-party system came to be what it is today. So the two-party system, as we think about it, with Democrats versus Republicans, and existed around 1860. And that has occurred with a series of realignments, and one realignment as well. But a realignment is when there's a major split of power between the parties, and those realignments are caused by voters or groups of voters having a very big change in kind of like philosophical or policy preferences that cause them to that shift of power for the party. And then when we think of critical elections, we're thinking of elections that signal that ideological change. And critical elections can be a set of elections that occur in a row that show a gradual change. So, within those two, types of city changes, power changes, you can think of a couple of key lines which are specific elections that change power in and of themselves. So 1800, 1860, 1932. But you can also think of this critical elections idea with multiple elections in a row, signaling ideological changes, such as the secular realignment of 1964, 1964, where the South, gradually over time shifted from a dominant and we'll walk through the key alignments, and then we'll talk about where the secular alignment and left us in modern politics. But to begin with, before we do that, I'll give you a couple minutes to do the attendance quizzes. Make sure you get it out. The code is party, so party is all caps. And I'll give you like 2 to 3 minutes. Make sure you can have the time to think about those questions and get an answer.
Code is part of the agenda, it's not. When you say part of it, code. Fun. I play the Jeopardy music. Okay, that's enough. That's enough time.
Okay. Cool. So, got where we left off. In 1800, the first key alignment that I want you guys to think about is when the Democratic Republican Party effectively ended the Federalist Party at the time of the victory over incumbent John Adams. So this election, the kind of beginnings of the two-party system were formed through the outcome here. And then in 1860, kind of moving us up to something more relevant to modern day, Lincoln, the newly reformed Republican Party, the slate of Democrats, as well as candidates, and that election sent a signal that policy preferences and the range of potential policies in America was about to change, and that caused the South, over fear of the abolition of slavery, proceeded with the Union and that created the war. And as you recall, for a definition of realignment, critical election, we're looking at really things where a different party took control and fundamentally changed the structure and ideology of the country. And so that is probably the election that most changed structure, and then most changed ideology, I would say 1932, where Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the Democratic candidate for president, basically threw Herbert Hoover, the Republican, out of office over popular opinions of his mismanagement of the financial crisis that preceded the Great Depression. And FDR is a notable realignment election simply due to the complete distinction between the post-FDR approach to federal government that was embraced by Americans versus the FDR approach. So prior to FDR, the American view on federal government was fairly limited. Even the original era in the 1910s and such did not necessarily have as much role for the federal government bureaucracy in particular as FDR. And FDR, through his party platform and his political philosophy, changed how willing Americans were to accept a large federal debt and significant intervention in the economy and in, the industry more broadly. In the modern day, there's things maybe like the South being more Democratic, in New England, the North being more Republican, has changed. Over time, as the Democratic Party became more fully liberal, more conservative way, gradually interpreted those signals and, the idea that they weren't wanted there, that there was a clear ideological difference between them and the, National Democratic Party. And so Republicans felt that an opportunity to pick up new support itself, by appealing to that within the party. And that leaves us with a moderate political nationalism, like this. You can think of New England and the West Coast as fairly, consistently Democrat at the presidential level. The South and the Midwest fairly Republican. The Midwest is a little bit interesting there because some of the like handful of swing states are also located in the Midwest. In the South, would be the case as well, Georgia and to a lesser extent Virginia. And another extremely important thing about American politics is the urban-rural side. So urban areas of the country tend to be fairly liberal. Rural areas of the country tend to be fairly conservative. And there are exceptions to that for sure. And there are exceptions to kind of like all of these general categories. Because as you can see, there are like pockets of fluid residence regions that don't necessarily fit into the general category we're laying out here. But again, those are more outliers, and that's probably the most useful way to think about that. So that's kind of how that secular realignment, for especially with the South and North, that's how that secular realignment is going. This is the modern map. And those are kind of the main elections that you want to consider when you see questions about like realignment or like what a realignment is. And that brings us to our last lecture, which is party identification and the concept of an independent. So party identification was identified as a stable emotional attachment, usually like a psychological attachment almost to a political party. However, the term stable in that definition is a little bit misleading because stability is not perfect. As we discussed, the idea of alignment and realignment, a major event that signals a completely kind of like fundamental ideological shift in the country, or like an external fact to a historical event like the election of Lincoln and the Civil War, and disrupt that identification to change how people view themselves as related to a political party. Secondly, many small compounding events can change that risk as well, as like executive realignment, where gradual shifts in the Democratic Party become more liberal, have alienated the conservative thing that was picked up by Republicans. So there's often an argument that's generally advanced nowadays that party ID is breaking down because of this rise. So previously, I showed how independents occupy a fairly large, above 40% segment of the public. Nowadays, this extends the graph out to show you how that trend has changed over time. As you can see, 2005 was a massive rise in the number of independents and share of for identifying. However, independents are not necessarily true independents, and they might not be as willing and able to vote for either party as that term by itself might imply. So, polling in 2018 found that 81% of people who would identify themselves as independents actually lean for Republicans or Democrats if you ask them to follow up and be more specific about their beliefs. There are only 7% of people who are true independents, where voters are actually up for grabs, who can actually be swayed either way. And these voters are a small minority in the broad picture of American society. So,
Something real quick, can independents vote Republican primaries? No. Democrats cannot vote in the Republican primaries in Oklahoma, just Republicans. Can independents vote in the Democratic primaries? Yes, they can. Interesting that the Republicans won't let them in. Okay.
yeah, so there's a reason why like a party might be more open to independents or not. I think in Oklahoma, the Democrats in the East.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they don't need those really independents. So and Democrats might for sure they might want to.
Valerie's not here, so I can talk about this, but, we talked about when Joy Hoffmeister was running, for governor of Oklahoma, she's running as a Democrat, because she was formerly a Republican, changed parties. And I said, even if all the Democrats and all the independents voted in Oklahoma, they still could not outwin just the Republican Party.
Yeah, absolutely,
And by registered voter count.
absolutely. That's the idea that political culture change throughout the states, so, part of the different frameworks and they know that. So there are a few reasons I want to end on before we talk about the idea of like non-voting. So, to give you an overview of like what now is, currently and what the plans are right now. 2020 is very high, for America. America has a low turnout. But in 2020, 56.8 is like 18 years old, decided to vote in the presidential election. And this is the highest voter turnout point in the history of the this might lend some support that argument about parties being good for democracy by mobilizing people, by getting people to vote. At the same time, some of this is driven by polarization, speaks that negative aspect of party. So there's kind of debate over how useful parties are for democracy, how much good they do in society, those types of things. However, that's a different question from NPA, like where are parties fairly strong people and where are using the parties kind of falling short. So if we look by like very on demographic factors of what allows a party to win elections, we can see that Republicans tend to have better outreach with male voters, Democrats tend to have better outreach with women voters. Republicans have made a lot of gains in appealing to voters in the high school degree or less and and people who have like a social degree somehow are pretty split. Additionally, Democrats have their reaching out to college grads, people with postgraduate degrees. They do well with younger voters, particularly millennials. Baby boomers are surprisingly split today. The silent generation and the board, the public. And that leads us to an idea of why. So, even though 2020 voter turnout even 20% more, that's still involved around 1/3 of the 18-year-old are not voting. So as far back as 1960, there have been explanations of non-voting that primarily attribute the phenomenon to the violence issue, where that's higher 1960 non-voting as a product of the American system, not necessarily incorporating every part of society and all people who might feel like they are being excluded from the American product. So that does still appear in statistics of voting and voting that polls like that the terms like Pew and others collect, and they try to estimate that by identifying who these people are and how they differ from non-voters or such things. But as you can see, the largest group of non-voters are primarily consisting of people making below 50 grand per year, and I would imagine that if you split that up even higher, the lower you go, so that leads me to a final question, you guys, which is, given that we know America has a voter turnout problem, what would you propose in order to increase turnout and mobilize voters?
How get more people to vote?
Give more people those jobs where they're making 50,000 or above.
Yeah.
Turnout, going to
Pretty cheaper in the polls than
I feel like educating the voters at the polling stations may be a benefit, because if they don't have time to be spending researching the candidates and how they know who vote, if they know what they're voting for at the station and that they can research the data, they may be more like informed for their voters.
I wish we had cooler stickers. Georgia has a peach.
Make it easier to register to vote.
I heard a lot of like.
Y'all put the polling stations in churches is what I hear a lot too.
Okay, so some of the things back, guys, were the idea of replicated how, maybe people don't have down to that box if you don't really work from. And then what ties into, about with, that free house tax and how even like demagogues take advantage of people in separate as well. I also heard with tax misinformation, Christian point. So if people don't know, how the voting process works, how the parties work, how the system works, and then maybe that is what you can do, because if people don't have very knowledge of the system, then even if it does work for them, they might not be able to